Welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina, and in today's video, I'm starting the seeds for my summer garden. So I'll be starting about 350 plants today. I'm gonna give some of them away to my mom and to a friend. Most of them are gonna go in my garden, and all the rest I'm gonna sell in a plant yard sale. That's something I'm trying out for the first time this year as well. So stick around, walk you through my process, how I get everything planted, labeled, and ready to go under the lights. So if you're interested in learning more about seed starting, stick around. So first up, I have all the things that I need to get started right now. I have all of my seed trays already filled with my potting mix, my seed starting mix here. All of these behind me, they don't have seeds in them yet, but I went ahead and pre-filled them. I do have a video when I started my cool weather seeds, and in that video I filled, you could see me filling all the seed cups and all of that, but I figured we didn't really need that for this video. Since we'll be talking about all these different varieties, that's gonna take a lot of time. So I did not include that part in this video, but just so you know, my process is I make my own seed starting mix. You'll save a ton of money doing it that way, especially if you're growing this many plants. My mix is made of just 2 ingredients. I use peat moss and vermiculite, 3 parts peat moss to 1 part vermiculite. I mix those. I have a big, huge tub that I use for it, or sometimes if I do it outside, I use a wheelbarrow. But I mix those together, and then to moisten it, I use boiling water, and that helps to kill any insects that might be in the peat moss, namely fungus gnat eggs, so that you don't end up with a ton of them in your house. So I mix it with that. That's how I moisten the soil. And then I let it sit, of course, to cool down, and then it's ready to go. So all of these are filled with those 2 ingredients. Now, I do recommend that you check out cocoa coir. That can be used in place of the peat moss, and I hear it's better for the environment. I saw peat moss from last season, so that's what I'm using. But when that runs out, I'm going to check out cocoa coir because yay earth. All right, so all of these are filled in. What I am using to start my seeds in are these small trays. They actually come in a 72 flat. They're about, I don't know, 1.5 inches deep and maybe about 1.5 inches around square. I use these to start my cool weather veggies as well, and so I'm using them for my warm weather. I bought these actually last season. I have cut them. This isn't 72. This one is only 24 to fit inside of the drain tray that I use. Now, as far as the watering and the trays go, because obviously this has holes in it, for this I have these like foil pans. I purchased these at the Dollar Tree, and there are 2 of these pans and they're for $1, so they're 50 cents each, and they work great for holding these in place. So this is what I use. Now some of them are cut into 30, just because I realized after I cut this one that I could actually cut them a little bigger and they still fit in this pan. But that's what I'm using to start my seeds in. Now for most of my plants, I will be repotting these during the time that they're in the house growing, but I want to start them here. The reason why I like starting them in smaller cells rather than in the cups that I'm going to put them in, that I'm going to upplant them in, is for a couple of reasons. One, for tomatoes, I like to start them a little smaller because I can replant them and replant them a lot deeper. If you've grown tomatoes before, you already know this, but in case you don't, tomatoes will grow roots up and down the stem if you put the stem in soil, because they're meant to be vines, and if you let them sprawl, they would actually grow all over the ground, and the roots would hook into the ground. But most of us don't grow tomatoes like that because we don't have acres and acres of land to use. So, but when you repot tomatoes, you plant them extra deep, and that gives them even more volume of roots, if that makes sense. Like, because the stem will turn into roots, will grow roots, and it'll anchor the plant better. So you get a stronger tomato plant if you replant it. Now there are other ways to do that, of course, but I like to do that and pot up my tomatoes in that way. Now another reason I like to start in these smaller cells for most of my plants, not just the tomatoes, is because then I found that I can use fewer seeds that way, because then I don't have to double up on the seeds. I can just do a couple of extra plants in the case that, 1 or 2 of them doesn't germinate, and I'll be okay. The third reason is because it just takes up less space over the lights, and it's easy for me to just get started. It takes a really long time. I need to stop moving this, probably make a lot of noise. It takes a long time to fill the cups that are this size with soil. And so if I were waiting to, it's not really soil, I guess, it's soilless mixture. if I were having to fill all of these up and get all the seeds planted, it would just take me a lot longer. So doing it this way, starting it in these smaller cells, it's just a lot quicker getting them filled with the mixture, getting the seeds planted, and then when I'm ready to upplant them, I can do them a few at a time, and it won't be something that takes me, you know, an entire day to do, because it'll take quite a while to get all these upplanted. So that's why I started in these smaller cells. So I'm going to start these. They'll stay in these cells for about 2 to 3 weeks, essentially until they at least have one set of true leaves, and then I'll start upplanting them into their permanent homes. Now for their permanent homes, for most of them, I will use cups this size. These are just plastic cups. These are actually the leftover ones from last year. I have more of them, so I'm gonna use all of those before I get any more, if I need more. And I don't know what size these are. I wanna say they're probably like 6 to 8 ounces, probably about 8 ounces, but these worked great. I used these last year for, I think I had pepper plants in these, maybe some tomatoes. I also use these for a lot of my marigolds. I grew from seed in these cups, and they were wonderful. So I just washed them all with soap, because you want to make sure, you know, you're killing any fungus or any germs that might be in them. So I washed these, and I filled them with the potting mix, and yeah. So the ones that I've already filled, I'll actually be using these to start my squash seeds, because squash seeds are really big, so you want to plant them deeper than, you know, you would in these types of cells. And because they grow really, really quickly, I'll just plant the squash in these and let them stay here, rather than having to upplant them, because they're going to grow out those small cells just so fast. Other things to keep in mind before we get started planting the seeds is that there are some plants that I will start from seed that I'm not going to start yet. So today is February 26th, and so it is exactly Saturday, exactly 6 weeks out from when I plan to put these plants actually outside in my garden on April 9th, I believe is the date. For me, that's the date when it is very, very, very unlikely, like there's less than a 10% chance that we would get frost after that date. Also, and actually even the week before, I could probably get away with putting them out. But remember, when you're looking at your frost dates, it's not just, okay, I can put them out as soon as I'm probably not going to get frost anymore. You also want to make sure that the night temperatures aren't below the 40s, because tomatoes and peppers don't really like that very much. You can actually still damage the plants if the night temperatures get below 40. And they can have damage that you may or may not see, but it can inhibit their production. So I don't like to get them outside until about a week after my, you know, last frost date, until we're at that 90% probability. So that is why. So because of that, I'm 6 weeks back from that, and that's why I'm starting my seeds now. So when you're looking at when to start your seeds, I recommend you do the same thing. Look at that last frost date, and then count back 6 weeks. That's when you need to be starting them. And I recommend even, you know, waiting or counting back 6 weeks after the week after your last frost date, so that you know that the night temperatures are going to be warm enough. Now some plants will be fine, especially like my cool weather stuff. I'll put that out before the last frost date. But for peppers and tomatoes, you want to make sure that they are not out with, you know, long periods of time that are going to be below 40 degrees, even if it's above freezing, because it can cause some damage to the plants. All right, so that was a long intro spiel, but let's get started. All right, so like I mentioned, I have these filled with my peat moss vermiculite mixture. And I already have labeled them as well. You can see I have my little popsicle sticks that some of them I've cut in half, some of them I haven't. But yeah, I have popsicle sticks that I'm using to label these, and I just label them at the top. Now, to make my life a little easier, so I'm not having to put a popsicle stick in every single cell, I keep the rows together. So for instance, this whole, I guess it's a column, but this whole column is one type and one type and one type, so that I can easily see what is going where. So these are some of my tomatoes, and I recommend labeling them ahead of time, because then it makes it easier when you're actually pulling out the seeds and knowing where to put what, rather than putting the seed and then having to label it, because you might, you know, forget what was in it before you know, it just, to me, minimizes issues. Not to mention, I don't like having to write and touch things when I'm getting my hands dirty. I like to kind of separate that action. So, start with my tomatoes. Let's see. I have some seeds in here. By the way, you may have seen this in other videos, but I started collecting my seeds in here. where I had to like actually empty the packet and put them in this thing. And then I saw somebody do this. I don't remember where. It was on somebody's YouTube video. But I saw them use one of these, which is like a photo holder thing. And I thought this was perfect because it's way easier. You don't have to remove the seeds from the packet. You just put the packet in the little container and it keeps everything dry and together. So, but I don't remember if I have any Romas in here. I don't think I do. So this tray, I have Roma tomatoes and Amish paste that I'm growing. Just gonna get my tomato seed container out. Ready to go. Now this year I'm growing a lot of different varieties of tomatoes. So I'll just talk about those as I'm planting or before I plant, so that way I can fast forward through the actual planting part because otherwise the video will be crazy long. Okay, so in my garden I grow my Roma tomatoes and also grow Amish paste. Those are the ones that I'm growing mainly to make sauce out of. Those are Determinate varieties, so they're going to put out all their tomatoes at once. And my plan this year, and if you watch my garden planning video, you saw this. My plan this year is to, once they put out all their tomatoes and they're pretty much done, is to pull up the plants and have some new ones ready to go. So I'll be starting some more tomato plants in the summer so that I'll be ready for that so I can get a second harvest. We have a pretty long growing season here, about 250 days. I'm in North Texas, Dallas area, zone 8A. And so we actually have the time to get 2 seasons of these tomatoes. And so I'm really excited about that because then I can make twice as much sauce as I made last year. Roma tomatoes I grew last year, they did great. So I am growing mostly Romas for sauce, but I am growing a few Amish paste as well. I heard they were really good, so I want to give those a try. So just putting the seeds on top of the soil, 1 seed per cell, and then I'm actually, instead of covering it with my seed starting mix, I'm going to cover it with just vermiculite. So I have read articles and watched videos of people using this and saying it works really well, so you know what, I'm going to give it a try. My soil mix, like I mentioned, it is pre-moistened. You always want to pre-moisten your soil mix. One, because peat moss can be hard to kind of break the, if you try to water it when it's dry, at first the peat moss will kind of float. It doesn't absorb it right away. It has to break the surface. And so if you try to do that once you already have seeds, your seeds will be floating. It'll be a mess. So always pre-moisten. So these are already moistened. And so now I'll just put the seeds covered in a vermiculite, and then I'll spray it with my water bottle to moisten it from the top as well. So now I've covered them with vermiculite. So now I'm just going to spray these. All right, so first set of tomatoes planted. All right, so I'm going to start my second set of tomatoes. So before I plant all of these, because I may or may not record me planting every single plant, I want to go through with you guys. I'll just show you the tomato varieties that I'm growing this year. I already talked about my tomato and Amish, my Roma and Amish paste this year. This actually was a free seed packet, and I was not planning to grow it, so I guess I'm not. I am growing For my indeterminate tomatoes, that's when I like to have fun, get my slicing tomatoes, and also ones that we just like to eat fresh. And so this year I'm growing quite a few different ones. Growing this Chef's Choice orange tomato. I grew this one last year and it was delicious, y'all. It has kind of a citrusy, like a mild flavor. It's not very acidic. My tomato taste is not very acidic. I don't really care for the super acidic tomatoes. I like those on hamburgers and sandwiches somewhat, but I like more of the non-acidic tomatoes and lean more towards sweetness, and this one is delicious. I'm growing this Chef's Choice orange. I'm also growing this Honeycomb hybrid. This is actually, from what I understand, it's like another version of the, what do you call them? The Sun Gold, but this one has less prone to cracking. I grew these last year and they were so good. The kids and I, we ate them mostly just straight off the plant. They barely made it inside to be weighed in, but these are amazing and they are delicious. So I'm growing those again, growing a few plants of those, and I'll be including some of these for sale as well when I do my plant sale. This version is called Ice's Candy. It's supposed to be a really, really sweet and delicious version as well. So I'm growing these. Most of my tomato growing ideas I get from other YouTubers, so I figure you might be interested just as much as I am. I'm also growing this Sweetheart Cherry. I just happened to see this one on the website, the Baker Creek website. It sounded really good. It's very high in sugar, which, as I just said, is how I like my tomatoes. My kids like them too. So I figured I'd give this one a try. And they're shaped like hearts, like adorable. Okay. And then of the sweet ones, I'm also growing one called Sweetie. This one is supposed to be a really sweet and delicious one. So I'm going to try that out. So I'm growing these early doll hybrids. These came as a free bonus to when I ordered my corn seeds. And yeah, I'm gonna give them a try because I've never grown. And it literally says it right there, y'all. That's embarrassing. But yes, these are early dolls. I'm growing a few of these plants just to give them a try. I'm actually gonna put them in a container and see how they do. You know, I wouldn't mind some early tomatoes, so why not? And then I'm also growing this variety called Sun Peach. I heard they were really delicious. So I'm gonna give these a try too. I love trying new things, y'all. Indeterminate plants are where I get to have a little bit more fun because these are more just for eating and for enjoying. So I like variety. All right, and then to have some larger tomatoes for slicing and things like that, I'm growing the Cherokee Purple. Here, this one is delicious. So I can't wait to try that. And also this one called Costoluto Genovese. It looks really cool. I heard it's tasty. So giving that a try too. And these are old varieties, so that's kind of fun. And then I'm growing this yellow pear tomato because I like yellow tomatoes because, like I said, the low acid. And don't they look cool, right? Like, how fun is it to have all these fun, beautiful colors and these different varieties that you cannot get in stores growing in your garden? So that's one of the reasons I'm growing these. So here we go. So those are all of the tomato varieties I'm growing this year. And so now I'm gonna finish planting these tomatoes. You guys don't have to watch. I will turn off the camera for that. But then I'll be back with the peppers. So the last thing that I'm gonna do with these seeds before I put them on the shelf is I am gonna cover them in plastic wrap. You don't have to do this, it is optional, but I like to because it helps to keep the moisture inside, so it helps to keep the seeds from drying out or from the cells from drying out before the seeds have germinated. Now, these cells, these smaller cells, they actually dry out really, really quickly, and the solution is moist, which is perfect, but it's gonna dry out very fast. So if I put some plastic wrap over it, now of course if you have like those little domes or lids, then those work great too. But since I don't have those for all these pans, I just use a little plastic wrap and cover them, and that helps them to stay moist during the germination process. So it's just regular plastic wrap. Not perfect, but it wants to stick to things, especially itself. And it's just wide enough for these pans, so pull it. To pull it tight, but not so tight that my little popsicle sticks are gonna break through it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, like a perfect seal. That'll still help to hold in the moisture. So, whoa. That's louder. All right. Let's get enough on this side. Now, I could tape it, but I cannot be bothered to do that. All right, so let me get the rest of these tomatoes planted. So all the tomatoes are now planted, wrapped. Everything is ready to go for those. And so next up are the peppers, eggplant, all of those types of things. So just so that you know, the varieties that I'm growing this year, in case you are looking for inspiration, are, just go through my packets here. The orange juice sweet pepper. This one is a really small pepper, but it's really sweet. I mean, this is probably the only pepper that I like to eat just plain without any sort of dressing or anything. It has a citrusy flavor. I know I've said that a lot. I've said the word citrusy a lot. I don't even think that's a word, but it does. It's a lunchbox pepper. So I'm definitely growing those again. I grew them for the first time last year and really enjoyed them. So I'll be growing these peppers again. The California Wonder pepper. I have never grown this one, but I've heard it's really good and grows well, and I got this seed at the Dollar Tree for $1, so it seemed like a win-win, right? Standard bell. Other sweet peppers I'm growing, let's see here. I have the Marconi red pepper. This one is a long, it's like almost like a banana pepper. It's a long one. It turns red if you let it turn red on the plant. It is extremely prolific. I use essentially all of my sweet peppers, aside from the orange juice sweet ones that are more for fresh eating. I use all the other ones kind of interchangeably in cooking and pickling, however I end up using them. So I like to grow ones that are going to give me a lot of peppers. And these Marconis are delicious. So I grow these. They grow a ton of peppers and they're really tasty. So I'm growing those again. I've grown these the past 2 years. Another one I've grown the past 2 years are the Cubanelles. I don't have a seed packet for these because I put them in here. These are also a longer one. They're a lighter green, and they also will turn red if you let them ripen on the plant. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. Depends on what the bug situation is. If I have squash bugs and several of them, then I'll pick the peppers a little earlier. Otherwise, I'll leave them on the plant to turn red. So Cubanelles, also very prolific, worth growing if you want to grow a lot of peppers on fewer plants. The Horizon sweet pepper, this is a bell pepper, and it turns orange when it's completely ripe. Really tasty, and it grew really well last year, so I'm growing that again. And the Purple Beauty pepper. This one also very prolific. The peppers turn purple, and they turn purple when they're pretty small, but actually they continue to grow after they turn purple, which I didn't realize. So once they turn purple, I still leave them on the plant a little longer and let them get a little bigger. And so those are the sweet peppers I'm growing. Now the other peppers I'm growing are hot peppers. I'm growing much more sweet peppers than hot peppers, but I have several varieties of hot peppers, of which I am going to grow one of each. And then of course I'm going to have extra plants to sell at my plant yard sale. So ancho peppers, or poblanos, these I grew this past year, and of course I want to make them into ancho chili powder, but also I use these in dishes, and I might even stuff a few and make like some stuffed ancho chiles. We'll see how that goes this year. But they grew, I want to say those plants grew probably about this high. They grew about chest high on me. They got so tall and produced so many peppers, so I'm going to grow one of these. Last year I had 2, and it was way more than what I needed, so I'm just going to grow 1. Habanero peppers, these are Helios Habanero, and these are incredibly prolific. I grew so many habanero peppers for a family that doesn't have as much use for hot peppers. So I ended up dehydrating a lot of this and making it into powder, which is then great because my husband and I, of course, we like hot food. It's just the kids don't. So we sprinkle it on chili, sprinkle it on jambalaya, sprinkle it on red beans. Essentially, pretty much everything we cook, then we sprinkle hot peppers on to make it spicy, since my kids don't really like them. So, but this grew really well. Very prolific peppers. Pretty much all these peppers grow a ton of peppers. Then I'm growing cayenne peppers. I have actually a few different kinds of cayenne seeds, but they're pretty much all the same pepper. The long, thin, red ones. I grow these and I make crushed cayenne powder and then also, or powder, cayenne powder, and then I also make crushed cayenne peppers. That's pretty much what I use them for. I might make some pepper sauce or something this year if I end up with even more than I need. We'll see how that goes. And then lastly, these Durango guajillo peppers. I bought these last year just because they looked cool. They turned black, apparently. I did not let any of them turn black. I picked them when they were green just because I needed to get them for the bugs did. But they were really delicious and they grew really well. They're not crazy, crazy hot. So I enjoyed these quite a bit. So I'll probably use these like I've used them this year. I just chopped them up in the freezer and used them in, put a few of them in chili to give it a teeny bit of kick without making it hot. But yeah, so I'm going to grow a plant of these again. So I'm growing a few, I believe I have on my list 2 each of my sweet peppers and then just 1 of the hot peppers. And the extra plants I'll be putting on sale. In addition to peppers this year, I'm actually growing eggplant for the first time. And so, like I said, in my garden planning, I talked about some of this, but I didn't get into all the varieties. So I wanted to make sure you guys had those. Rosita eggplant and fairy tale hybrid eggplant. I've never grown eggplant, so I just picked some varieties that had good reviews as far as flavor. So the fairy tale one, I think it's like a smaller, like a thinner one that looks kind of cool. And this one is kind of a standard size, I think. I don't know, y'all. But we're going to grow some eggplant this year, and I'm going to try to like eggplant. I'm actually pretty excited because I've always thought it tastes kind of a little too earthy for me. But I know things taste better when you grow them yourselves. I learned that about beets last year, so I'm going to give some eggplant a try. And plus, I had some space because last year I had a whole bed dedicated to peppers, and I had more than what I needed, so I had some space to add some eggplant. All right, and then in addition to those, I'm also growing tomatillos and ground cherries. I'm growing these in containers, but I, of course, still need to start the plants. So I have green tomatillos and purple tomatillos. I'm just growing 2 of each of these plants, and I'm going to put these either in grow bags or buckets. I'm going to see if I have, because I have several grow bags already and several buckets already. So I'm hoping that I don't have to buy any containers, that I maybe have enough from ones that I have left over from previous years, so we'll see. But these, the reason why I'm growing these in containers is because they take up a lot of space. And if I put them in a container, then I can kind of let the plants grow and just find a space for them to do what they need to do without them taking up a ton of space in a raised bed. Because they grew like out of the raised bed such that they were just like in the walkway. It was kind of a pain. So that's why I'm putting them in containers. But they grew really well and the bees really liked them. So I can place them in certain areas to kind of make sure my bees get spread around the garden. And then I'm also growing ground cherries. Ground cherries are so fun. These are one of my favorite things about gardening because I had never even heard of ground cherries until last year. I'm growing Aunt Molly's ground cherries. I grew these last year, so I'm growing these again. They were great. They were delicious. I loved eating these right off the plant, or right off the ground exactly, because they fell off the plant. But they were really tasty. They tasted like nothing I had ever eaten before. So that was really fun. Sweet, kind of like a caramel apple flavor, but very delicious. And then I found this variety of ground cherry, the New Hanover, when I was searching for seeds, so I ordered these as well. To me, they look exactly like the other ones, but we'll see what they taste like. I'm interested to see if I can, if the flavor is quite different. But ground cherries are a really fun thing to grow. If you've never heard of them, look them up. They grow as easily as tomatoes. They look like tomatillos. They have that little paper husk, but they're sweet. So if you have kids, this would be something fun to grow for them. All right, so those are the peppers and the tomatillos and the eggplants I'm growing. I'm gonna plant these just like I've done with all the tomato seeds, just putting the seeds in the cells and then covering them with vermiculite and then spraying with water. But actually I switched from my spray bottle to this Coke bottle with holes poked in the lid. The reason why is because I don't like how the spray bottle, it has air and the dry vermiculite just kind of blows over a little bit. It probably isn't that big of a deal, but I'm a little paranoid about my seeds like blowing away. So I use this because it doesn't release any air that makes the vermiculite blow around. So the next thing that I am planting are the herbs. I am growing a lot of herbs this year. One, because I love growing my own herbs for cooking. It's so fun to dehydrate them and then have all of the herbs that not all of the herbs I use, but a lot of the herbs I use come straight from my garden. And of course, getting to use them fresh, even better. Fresh herbs are quite expensive, so it's really nice when you can grow your own. And in addition to growing the ones from my garden, I'm also growing some for friends, and then I'll be selling a few of those plants in my plant sale, mostly basil, because I know that's one that sells really well. So the herbs I am growing in my garden this year are parsley, Italian. I like Italian flat leaf parsley. I don't really grow curly parsley. I like it because it is delicious. And I use parsley in a lot of my food. So I dehydrate some, but I also use a lot of it fresh. It's used a lot in Creole cooking, and I make quite a few dishes like that because my husband's Creole and the food is delicious. So I'm also growing rosemary. I grew a little bit of this last year, and then I ended up pulling it up because I planted it in a spot where it was getting too much shade, so it grew some, but not great. So I'm gonna grow this in a container. This rosemary is a perennial, so I should get a little more life out of it. The parsley, I'm planting some in a container, some in a couple of beds, I believe. I have to look at my garden plan. Lemon basil, all kinds of basil, y'all, so just be prepared because I love basil. Thai basil, this is probably my favorite type of basil, and of course it's great in Thai cooking and lots of other Asian dishes, and also it's just friggin' delicious, y'all. If you're not growing Thai basil, grow some Thai basil. Genovese or sweet basil, of course. Purple basil, this one is one of my favorites too because the bees love it a whole lot. Flavor-wise, it's good. It's kind of mild, but the bees, when this one goes to seed, which it inevitably will because I'm in Texas and it gets to be 1,000,000 degrees in the summer, the bees love this stuff. I am growing mint. I guess this is peppermint. I already have some that, and I grow mint only in containers because as you probably know, if you've grown mint before, it likes to just sprout up and expand from underground. So I grow it only in containers. I have one container I can already see where the mint kind of died because of the cold, but it's starting to grow back. So, but I'll be planting some mint seeds in another container as well. I have spicy globe basil, lime basil. And by the way, I've made pesto with all of these and delicious. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You can make pesto with all kinds of basil, but also with other herbs. We ate some parsley and mint pesto with pearl couscous the other day. Parsley and mint pesto that I made from herbs from my garden over the summer, and I just freeze it, and it was so good. And then I'm also growing cilantro. Cilantro is something I love to grow because I love the taste of it. I love it in salsa and in everything essentially because I love cilantro. But it goes to flower really quickly in the heat. It bolts so fast. So I am going to try to grow a ton of cilantro and dehydrate as much as I can, and then I might just try to grow some more in the fall so that I get a longer season with it because I didn't get much time with my cilantro before it was gone. And if I remember correctly, it's like my cilantro had pretty much bolted before I had enough tomatoes to make salsa, and that was really annoying having to buy cilantro to make salsa. So, but either way it goes, complaint aside, I'm growing cilantro because it's delicious. Cinnamon basil. This, I have like 2 seeds left. A friend gave this to me last year and I grew some, but I have 2 seeds left, so I'm going to grow it again. And this year I'm going to save the seeds and not save them like a dummy. But this was so tasty. Y'all, like, it's like basil and cinnamon. Like, how do they come up with this stuff? I do not know, but it's good, so grow it. I'm also growing chives and, that's parsley. Sage. I grew sage last year and I ended up needing to remove the plant because it was growing where my strawberries were growing, and it was actually a pretty big plant just from one season. So I'm going to grow it in a container because sage is also perennial. So I'm growing all the perennial herbs in containers so that I can actually save them and not worry about them taking up space in the bed. If you heard that, that was my family. All right, so I'm growing green onions. These aren't technically an herb, right? But I like to have some of these always available. Now, during the summer, before I harvest my onions that I'm growing, I do actually trim the tops, and I use those anytime I need fresh green onion, because there's so many of them, so there's plenty. But once those are pulled up, then I don't have a source for green onions. So I like to grow a few so I have some for fresh usage. Thyme, I'm gonna grow thyme in a container as well. I do have some thyme already in my garden. It's in one of my raised beds, and I managed to not pull it up. It's growing great because thyme is a perennial, it can take the cold, but I wanna have one in a container so that if I need to remove the one I have in the bed, then I'll have some available. And I think that is it. So yeah, so those are all the herbs that I'm growing. I already have out in my garden some lavender and some oregano. I have 2 containers of oregano, and that's still doing great, so I'm not gonna plant any more of that. And I have a big lavender plant, and I haven't used any of it yet because what do you do with lavender? I think you make tea, right? So I'm gonna try some things with it, but since I have one big plant in a raised bed and I haven't used any of that yet, I'm not gonna plant anymore. So those are the herbs. I'm gonna get these planted. And I'm planting these just like I've planted everything else. They're pretty much the seeds on the surface. Now when it comes to the cilantro and the parsley, I put multiple seeds, and the green onions. But for the most part, sprinkle the seeds on the surface. And then I'm covering them in this vermiculite. And then wetting them with water. The seed starting mix is already pre-moistened. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and give you the rest of it so this video doesn't end up being too long, and then I'll show you everything when it's done. So once I'm done with these herbs, I'm going to set these back here just for a minute. I'm planting my squash and my zucchini. I'm just growing yellow straight neck squash and zucchini, and also like a regular zucchini. Now last year I didn't get any zucchini, and I got like 2 squash because the squash bugs got to the plants and they killed them because they are terrible. So this year I'm growing my squash and my zucchini in containers, so I know they're not going to be somewhere where squash bugs are already or have overwintered or whatever. And then I can kind of spread them out, so maybe some of the plants will do okay. I'm just growing 2 of each plant, and then I have some extras that I'll put in my plant yard sale. But I'm growing these in these cups because they just grow really quickly. So yeah, and these, by the way, this is what I'm gonna upplant most of my plants to when they're ready. I'll upplant them to either these or like these red, I say solo cups, but these really aren't because I got from Dollar Tree. But yeah, I use these, and I just get my drill and I stack them, and then I drill holes in the bottom, just like 2 holes, 2 or 3. And these are great for growing them. And I think a package of like 40 or 30 or something like that is $1. Well, I guess now $1.25 because Dollar Tree has gone up on their prices, but still way less expensive than getting pots. Yeah, and they work just as well. And then these cups I use for, last year I used these for some of my tomatoes, some of my peppers, but I may or may not need to. I mean, I have some, so I may use some of them. But last year I started my plants earlier than I should have, so I waited this year specifically to 6 weeks because I learned that under the lights, things grow faster than you expect them to. Like, they grew a lot in 6 weeks, and when I had some for 10 weeks, some for like 12 weeks, like a dummy, they got way too big, and that's what I'm avoiding this year because, one, having to deal with those plants for that long indoors is really a pain. Like, you have to come in and water them, you gotta check them, make sure they're doing okay, fertilize them. Whereas outside, to me, it's just a lot easier to care for them. But when they're indoors and they're getting their regular fertilization, they have the light, perfect lighting, and no predators, they do grow rather quickly. So 6 weeks is plenty of time. It might even be more than what I need for the zucchini. Now, the veggies that I am growing this year from seed that I'm not starting yet are my cucumber and my watermelon. I'm growing those. I might do another video, but I'm starting those in about 2 weeks because they don't need more than 4 weeks. They grow really big, really fast. Last year I grew some from starts that I started indoors, and then some I just put the seeds directly in the ground. But since watermelon does take quite a bit to produce, I want to get a little bit of a head start on that. So I'll just go ahead and do the cucumber as well. But 6 weeks is too long. The plants just grow too quickly for that. So I'm going to wait and start those in 2 weeks. Now, in addition to veggies, the last thing that I'm starting are flowers. Now the flowers, I'm actually starting in this seed starting tray. It's 72 cells, so about the same size. I mean, it's the same number of cells as one of these before I cut them apart to fit into my trays, but it comes with the bottom. And I purchased this actually just yesterday, mainly because this cell, okay, this thing's heavy. I wanted to pick it up and show you, but the cells, maybe I can't, they're wet, so it's heavy. So the cells, as you can see, are deep. They actually are like 2 inches, 2.5, something like that. They're pretty deep cells. And so that was why I bought this rather than using what I already had. And that's because I want the flowers to be able to like stay in this container the whole 6 weeks. And maybe I can just plant them from here rather than having to upplant all these flowers. That is my goal with them. So I got this thing that was a little bit bigger because I think that deeper thing could accommodate the root ball for 6 weeks. Now, as far as the flowers that I'm growing, let's see here. Now, the flowers that I'm growing are I am growing Shasta daisies. I bought these seeds last year and I did not plant any, so I want to give these guys a try. I love daisies. I think they're beautiful, and so I'd love to have a few of these in my garden. I'm growing these Bachelor Button Blue Boys. They just look kind of cool. They're really blue. I got these at Dollar Tree last year as well and didn't plant them, so I'm going to grow these guys. I am growing Johnny Jump Up. A friend gave me some of these seeds last year. I have some in a bag that I hadn't grown yet, and so I'm going to grow those plus a few extra. From what I understand, these are an edible flower, so they're great for garnishing food and things like that. And they are very pretty. They look kind of like pansies, so I'm going to grow some of these. And then, of course, marigold. I have a few different types of marigold that I'm growing. But most of them are orange and yellow, and I have some that are like orange with red outline. But marigolds I like to put within the garden too because they have that really strong scent, so they're great at confusing pests, and they're just really beautiful. But they do get big, so I'll put some in around the edges of beds and then within containers as well. And then I'm also growing, I don't have seed packets of those because they're in little containers like these, but I'm growing Double Enchantress zinnias and Scarlet zinnias. I'll put a picture on the screen when I'm editing. They're zinnias, and one's red, one's pink, and they're beautiful. So I'm going to have those in my garden too. And then additionally, I'm going to do one more flat. I haven't prepared this yet because I realized I didn't have the seeds for my other marigolds. I like to grow the French marigolds as well. They're smaller. They don't get very big, just a couple of inches around the flowers, and the plants are pretty compact too. And I love those. Last year I put some in my front flower beds, and I think I may do that again this year, and also just have them around the garden in different places just to add beauty, bring in the pollinators to attract pests. So I'm growing Dainty Marietta and also just a French Sparky mix of marigolds too. So flowers, I'm also starting from seed. Remember, you can do that whether you're growing them for your garden or just to put, in your front flower bed for your house. You can also grow those from seed and save a ton of money because flowers are really good. All right, so I'm gonna get all the rest of these seeds started, and then I'll let you guys take a look and give my final tips for seed starting success. All right, so everything is planted now. All of my warm weather seeds that I'm starting 6 weeks out. Like I mentioned before, in a couple of weeks I'll be starting my cucumber and watermelon. I just don't want to start those now because that's too early for those plants. These are my flowers, and I actually am doing one more tray of small marigolds, of French marigolds, and I'll be doing those probably on Monday when the seeds arrive. So the last thing I do, I have everything wrapped. These have a little dome that goes on them, and I'll be putting them under the grow lights. It's already late, so I'm not going to turn them on today, and they also produce a ton of light, by the way, so I actually have some dark curtains that I've ordered that I'm going to hang around this so that the light stays in and doesn't like flood this room, because this room is actually also my office. It's not just for growing plants. Not to mention, outside of my house, there are big windows on the other side of this room, and outside my house at night, when all these lights are on, it looks crazy. Like, it looks so bright. I'm sure my neighbors probably think we have some crazy things going on. So another reason for the curtains. But I do recommend that if you're growing stuff in a room where you're going to be spending time, you probably want to get some curtains or some sort of way. You could even like hang cardboard boxes or whatever, but something so that the light isn't just all in the room, because it's a lot of light. I don't know if it does anything to you or your eyes, but I know I don't like it. But yeah, so all of these are going to sit here. All my seeds, remember I covered them in vermiculite. I used my seed sorted mix, which is just peat and vermiculite, and then covered them in vermiculite this year. I haven't done that before, but I'm hoping it goes well. And this room, remember for seeds, you want to have, for germination, most seeds want it to be a little bit warm. This room, this office is one of the warmest rooms in my house, just because once we keep the door closed, all the heat that comes in kind of stays in, and the rest of the house is a little bit more open, so this room actually stays really warm, so it's kind of the perfect spot for that. And then I'll turn on the lights probably starting tomorrow. Of course, none of the seeds will be germinated yet. None of them need light to germinate, none of these, but it makes it even warmer where the plants are, which helps to speed up the germination process, because I don't use or have any heat mats or anything. But yeah, and so in a few days, I expect to start seeing some of these guys germinate, and in a few weeks I'll be potting them up, and I'll definitely do a video on that when I pot up the tomatoes and the peppers, etc. The flowers I'm hoping to leave in this container. Hopefully they don't get root bound, but I want to leave these in this container until I pot them outside. And the herbs, we'll kind of see. If they start getting really big, then I might have to upplant them, but I might be able to get away with leaving them in these for the 6 weeks. So we'll just see how it goes. Everything grows at different rates, but I know the tomatoes and the peppers are going to need to be repotted. Okay, so here are the seeds all finished up. Everything is under the lights. No, they have not sprouted yet, so the lights are not 100% necessary at this point, especially the first, couple days. But it is important that whenever the seeds do sprout, you want them to be met by like bright light so that they start growing strong from the beginning. You don't want them to start growing leggy because there wasn't light there when they first emerged. So I like to keep the lights on for that reason, just during the day, not like 16 hours or so, just kind of for during the, while the sun is out. Keep the lights on. Now, one thing I want you guys to notice also is how close these lights are to the containers. They are just a couple of inches above them. And that's how you have to do it when the plants are small. The lights need to be close. So this, I would say, this probably is, I would say about 3 to 4 inches between the seedlings and the lights. Like that's probably about as far as you want them to be when they first emerge. I have 3 lights on these 2 shelves on each of them, so that's plenty of coverage, but I wouldn't have them any higher than this. Now, the larger the plants get, the further away from them the lights can be, because once they have more leaves, they're able to absorb more light through those leaves, and photosynthesis is a little more efficient. But when they first emerge and they only have those 2, I can't remember their name, but the 2 starter leaves they have, then they need light and they need it close to them so that they can make food for themselves. But yeah, here they go. And as soon as they emerge, as soon as the first seedling emerges, that's when I remove the covering. The covering is just not required, but it's simply to help keep the moisture in so they don't dry out so quickly, because the seeds need to be consistently moist in order to germinate properly. And of course, having the lights on also produces some heat for them as well. Not much, these are LEDs, so they don't run very hot, but it does produce some heat that also aids in germination. So that is it. This is, I counted, or I added it up, this is 348 separate plants. So I'm only using right now 3 shelves of this, 5-tier shelf. So I have more that I can use, 2 more shelves that are not being used right now. And then I also have a 3-foot wide shelf with 3 tiers to use as well once I pot up all of these seedlings into their own individual cups. So I'll have enough space for my plants on these shelves once I need to pot them up. But for now, I have them on these all together so that I can have the shelves lowered to the height I need. And notice these are a lot further apart because I'm not using those yet. And I have my lights set up to where I can turn on just a couple of shelves at a time and I don't have to waste electricity. So once again, thank you for joining me for this video today. I hope there were some tips that you found helpful or some varieties you're considering trying. Either way, thanks for sticking around until the end. Don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe and the bell so that you can get notified every time I post a new video. And have a great one.